Good evening. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Pelton. I'm the Associate Dean for External Relations at the Johns Hopkins University School of Education, and I'm honored to serve as your host and the moderator for tonight's conversation. Our discussion tonight, Education as a Cornerstone of Democracy, a conversation with the School of Education, will explore what it truly means to prepare the next generation of democratic citizenship, examining the concrete indicators of successful civic engagement and the vital work our School of Education is doing to support civics education across the country. Our conversation will focus on what scholars consider the key indicators of democratic citizenship, how the School of Education collects ongoing data about civics and schools, and what our current partnerships with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation and other civic providers teach us about American democracy. I'm very excited about tonight's conversation. Joining us for this lecture are three distinguished members of our School of Education community. First is Dr. Ashley Rogers Berner, Associate Professor and Director of the Institute for Education Policy. Dr. Berner is the author of Educational Pluralism and American Democracy, published by Harvard Education Press in 2024, and brings extensive expertise in citizenship formation, educational pluralism, and the political theories of education across different national contexts. Next is Dr. Joseph Reilly, Assistant Research Scientist with the Center for Research and Reform in Education. Dr. Reilly specializes in educational psychology, teacher development, and program evaluation, and leads the department's foundational research unit while also serving as an instructor in our Master of Science in Education program. I'm also delighted to welcome a current School of Ed PhD student, Shinui Kim, whose research focuses on educational inequity across nations and the role of education systems in various societal contexts, including higher education's impact on social and political movements. Before we begin, I'd like to remind those watching live that you can submit questions using the chat feature below, and we'll be monitoring throughout the program, and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A segment towards the end of the broadcast. Ashley?
So thank you so much for this warm welcome. And I just want to thank you all who are watching at home and joining Hopkins. It's really a joy to be part of a university that cares openly and concretely for the role that universities play in fostering democracy. So it's great joy to be with you all. Just wanted to give some overview and context to this really exciting issue. First of all, since the founding of our country, we have funded education, K-12 education and higher education, with a huge emphasis on preparing the next generation of citizens. We all know how important this is, and now more than ever. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about what we mean by preparation for citizenship and how we know if it's actually happening. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is, if I could just advance my slide, is what we really mean what do scholars look to for successful civic formation? And there are really four components. There's civic knowledge, civic skills, the habit of civic engagement, and the practice of civil tolerance. Just to unpack all of those for a quick moment. Civic knowledge means not just how does the US government work, but how does government around the world work? How has history worked? How do different people think about government, about religion, about power? How do economies work? What does geography teach us about history and about context? So all of these things, really all the different subject matter, is really important for preparing you to vote, to judge diplomacy, foreign policy, and so on. So civic knowledge is super important. Civic skills, that means not only things like, can you write with clarity, but can you interpret graphs? Do you know how to give public talks? Do you feel confident writing you're a congressperson, and so forth? The civic skills. The habit of civic engagement is really the practices of community service, of involvement, and then lastly, civil tolerance means the capacity to have strong beliefs and to tolerate and disagree with respect. All of these are learned behaviors and they happen in school, they happen outside of school, and we're happy to unpack this further. But just going to pause for a moment and let people look at those 4 different measures. Then I want to talk briefly about what the School of Ed is collecting on an ongoing basis that helps the field judge whether these things are happening in schools. So the first is about political knowledge and civic knowledge. And here I want to really make a point that we look for not only skills-based curriculum, but do schools actually teach kids content in the major subjects? And the real truth is most schools in America don't. There's a whole history here, but we tend to focus on process and skills instead of mastering real knowledge. So our institute has trademarked some analyses of real world curricula to assess, do they build meaningful content knowledge in all the subjects, year on year, grade by grade? And we also, in social studies curricula, when we review those, we actually look for the presence of multiple perspectives and viewpoint diversity. So that is one ongoing data collection that we do at the School of Education. I'm happy to talk more about that. The second piece of ongoing data collection that we do is through our School Culture 360. And I'm going to turn this over to Shinui, who actually specializes in one component of school culture that we work on at the Institute, and that is the open classroom climate. So I'm going to turn this over to Shinui for a few comments about what we're collecting in open classroom climate and why it's so important.
Thank you, Ashley. So we know from research that the learning environment plays a major role in civic education as it both influences acquiring knowledge and supports, students' virtue and values. Barber et al. Defines school and classroom climate as an environment that entails interpersonal relationships, a sense of safety, a feeling of connectedness, and reliable support for learning. Based on multiple studies, having an environment where students acquire knowledge about civics and freely discuss topics and issues of politics and society is positively associated with civic learning outcomes, and it is termed as open classroom climate. This has been also proven by the data from International Civic and Citizenship Education Study, showing consistent positive associations with students' civic knowledge, interest in issues, and political efficacy for the last 3 cycles. The School Culture 360 collected data on school climate and open classroom climate. School climate includes survey data in various aspects of overall school environment, such as teachers, student relations, student-student relations, clarity of expectations, fairness of rules, safety, bullying school-wide, student engagement school-wide, teacher-home communications, and staff relations. School climate is measured based on responses from relevant actors, including students, teachers, parents, and administrators. Furthermore, open classroom climate explores whether students or teachers feel safe or are allowed to have different opinions and express them, which is highly associated with civil tolerance as well. Open classroom climate data is collected from teachers and students, not from parents or administrators.
I should add with Shinui that our survey has been in 3,000 schools across the country, and we're continuing to collect this data as well.
So the gateway question is, do you discuss political or social issues in any of your classes? When teachers and students respond yes, then they receive 6 questions using scales adapted from questionnaire conducted by the International Civics and Citizenship Education Study. When measuring open classroom climate, the questions explore students' comfort level in discussing difficult subject, as well as teachers creating an environment in which different views are welcome and discussed. Here, we see that teachers are more optimistic about OCC overall, except for one area. How often do students bring up current events for discussion in class. In general, the higher the OCC as understood by students, the likelier it is that students carry the habit of civil tolerance into adulthood.
So, and I would say for Shinui that she studies these scales around the world, and so we have a real comparative here. Um, Thank you so much, Shinui. These are the two kind of ongoing data collections that we have from the knowledge maps in the School Culture 360, but the School of Ed is also very involved in some special projects. And in fact, you're going to hear from Joe. Shinui, Joe, and I just spent 2 days at the National Civics Bee because we are the research partner for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. We have a lot of projects, but Joe is going to focus on a few of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're so delighted to be here and so delighted to kind of elevate two really cool kind of partnerships that the School of Ed has going on right now through Ashley's Institute of Education Policy and everything. And we want to elevate two of them today. One is in kind of the school-based space or the curricular space, and then the other is in the co-curricular or kind of extracurricular space. And I'll start by talking about the Bill of Rights Institute. For those of you who might not be familiar, the Bill of Rights Institute is a education nonprofit based out of Virginia that produces some phenomenal free resources for educators nationwide. Currently, they have about just over 4,000 resources, if I'm not mistaken, from lesson plans to curriculum plans to instructional activities for teachers, for anybody doing anything related to civics-based education in a school setting, they have it. And these are highly vetted educator, again, kind of learning theory designed lessons and instructional resources that any social studies teacher in America can access and employ. And we currently have the privilege of looking at some newly developed collection of resources that Bill of Rights Institute has put together, which is their Government and Politics course. This is a very comprehensive course designed for middle and high school students to really provide a really kind of in-depth, comprehensive view of kind of what goes into U.S. government and the features of it. It has 7 units. It has 40 lessons spanning a whole host of topics ranging from foundation of America, self-government, all the way up to federalism and civil rights and civil liberties. We're currently working with the Bill of Rights Institute on looking at outcomes for students using this program in Colorado, and we're seeing some really exciting things with it so far. So we wanted to elevate that resource in the curricular space is something that, and we'll need to put some links in the chat here later, billofrightsinstitute.org. Anybody who's a social studies teacher, any parent who's passionate about social studies education, terrific resources that we're partnering with them on at the moment. And then sort of in the co-curricular space then, we have been very, very fortunate to partner with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for about three or 4 years now, Ashley, on looking at some of the resources they have, with the Cornerstone one being the National Civics Bee. The National Civics Bee, it's grown rapidly in the last 3 years, and we were just in Washington, D.C. yesterday for the national championship. But the National Civics Bee, it's meant to kind of be in a way, sort of analogous to what the National Spelling Bee is to spelling, where it is a national competition for middle school students that is based around them expressing kind of their content knowledge in civics, but then also kind of crafting their own kind of civic engagement projects and things like that. There are 4 stages to the competition. The initial stage is a application and essay that students write about a kind of community action project that they're passionate about. From there, the top applicants are then selected to participate in kind of localized competitions that are run through local chambers of commerce. The winners of those advance to state level competitions. And then from there, the state champions get to compete in Washington, D.C. over a 2-day competition. We were just there yesterday. If you ever want to feel hopeful about sort of the state of young people in the U.S. and what they're bringing to the table in terms of lots of things, but in terms of civic engagement and civic attitudes, watch the National Civics Bee. There are 39 contestants yesterday that we saw in action. Mario Lopez, AC Slater from Saved by the Bell was the host of this competition. A young man from Ohio won. He was interviewed on CBS News last night. Um, phenomenal stuff. So we really had a wonderful time working with them and kind of thought partnering and reviewing data that they collect is sort of part of their initiative too. So again, two really cool things that are happening in the School of Education space right now to sort of elevate civics learning and civics engagement in young people. So yeah, we can advance to the next slide.
Okay. Um, Thank you all. I should add that that's just the tip of the iceberg. We are also just starting a new project with the National Constitution Center, which is another huge national player in the space. And we have designed some projects with iCivics, which is also actually the largest provider of non-school-based for school-based and non-school-based games and information. It was started by Sandra Day O'Connor. So there are so many good things happening, which it's nice to know about, right? Because sometimes the
Absolutely.
world can feel like things are like democracy's at risk. We all know there are issues. So thank you for your time, and over to you, Jennifer.
Well, I actually want to ask a first question. I got the pleasure of seeing a picture of the three of you snapped at the Civics Bee and the joy in your faces and then the joy in your voice tonight. You've already told us a couple inspiring things, Joe, but I would just love to hear from each of you. What was one of the most inspiring things you're going to keep with you from that experience as you go forward in this work?
Well, I have one in mind right now, and this is I thought it was just such a cool story and just sort of just so symbolic of the times in a lot of ways as well. But we had the privilege of talking with parents of just about every kid who was there yesterday and meeting their families and just really kind of immersing ourselves in the experience. And there's one young person from Iowa who came who and I come from middle America myself, so this is a common thing. But if the high school football team wins the state championship, they get a parade back into town. Or if the high school basketball team, they're going to the state championship, they get a parade out of town. This young person, their town threw them a parade when they were leaving to come to the National Civics Bee. But because of the government shutdown, her flight got canceled. But they decided to drive all the way 16, 17 hours, whatever it was, to arrive at the National Civics Bee to compete in this because of the support of their community and because of sort of the passion for this type of event in the first place. So I thought that was just a really cool anecdote about just kind of the quality of families that are coming into this and just sort of the support that there is for civics here too. So that's one thing I'd like to share.
Well,
Awesome.
She
Before I let Ashley and Sheeny weigh in, I just want to remind our audience that you can bring your questions to us, drop them in the chat, and we'll ask some of your questions in a minute. Ashley, Sheeny.
Well, Shinui, you go ahead.
okay, so this was my first time in at National Civics Bee, and I felt really invigorating. Especially like Joe said, we had interviews with parents, and a lot of parents told us that it was really a pleasure for them to watch their kids having life-changing experiences, and um, students kind of acknowledge that civics starts from tiny things in their daily lives. And important thing that National Civics Bee did for them was that they could advance their ideas into practice, like what they had in their daily lives. And they can actually have some self-efficacy, self-esteem, and sense of achievement through by advancing these things into action. And I think it's really important in civics because students do feel they matter as a citizen in this society, and this experience was really inspiring in that way.
I would say two things really jumped out at me. The first was that it really, this program really works through local communities and particularly small businesses. And the Chamber of Commerce, many of us in the education space know a lot of business leaders who want to get involved in education and don't know how. And it was really striking to hear from so many of the chambers of commerce how it had invigorated them and how they were actually, helping the schools, helping the kids who are homeschooling kind of make their way to these competitions. It was really inspiring to see the way that business was getting involved. And the second thing that's come up both years that we've interviewed parents has been the intergenerational component.
Yes,
That's something
absolutely.
that has come up in a lot of civic conversations that we've been having. And in fact, the project that we have with the National Constitution Center will be looking at multi-generational learning around a civics quest. And there's a lot of curiosity about how do you actually support parents. A lot of the parents in the civics bee are first generation parents, and some of them were studying for their national citizenship test alongside their kid preparing for this competition. So that was so amazing to see the multi-generations.
That's wonderful. We have some questions from our audience. I'm going to ask, David wants to know, can you describe the data collection process you are using a bit more? What is the source of your international data? For example, are you using Talus or PISA, or is your collection run internationally?
It's a really good question. So the data that we're collecting in our School Culture 360 comes from mostly the US and Canada, because we partner with schools that opt in. However, the Open Classroom Climate scale that we use is from the International Civics and Citizenship Education Survey. So it's been validated and it's been used for 40 years in the field. I will say that the projects we're running for the National Civics Bee and for the Bill of Rights Institute also draw on the International Civics and Citizenship Education Survey. We have taken those valid scales for adults and for teenagers, and we've built them into our projects. The actual cross references to NAEP, which is our national assessment, and PISA, we do as well. Shinui has worked with a lot of those international data sets, the academic ones. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Well, I would say, so we're, like Ashley said, we're adapting scales from International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. They're conducting International Civics and Citizenship Study, and that's where we are adapting our scales from. And unlike those international questionnaire data, this is not a randomly selected schools or like students' data, but just to clarify on that, yeah.
Yeah. So the schools that we work with have opted in. They're not representative samples. We'd love to share and get wider use, but yeah. Does that answer the question, David?
I think it's good.
Okay.
We have a bunch more. So let me
All
ask
right.
Eric's question. So Eric was curious about what could be seen as a tension in what you're describing. On the one hand, a focus on knowledge over process, which implies that we know certain things. On the other hand, a focus on viewpoint diversity, which suggests that we need to look at issues from multiple perspectives. How do you navigate the potential tension between those knowledge facts versus viewpoint diversity? Are all viewpoints welcome, or does the state of our knowledge suggest that some have been proven untrue?
Oh,
Like
I mean,
vaccines, climate change, etc.
okay, so let me just tell you that I wrote a book recently that talks about the difference between exposure and indoctrination. And we could all talk about this all night long. It's a great question. And I would say just very briefly, please follow up with me on this, but very briefly, that most successful democracies have a baseline of knowledge that all kids have to access. They're not about skills. It's about, you really have to know the geography of you have to know the continents, you have to know these things that are kind of settled issues. Now, when it comes to things like interpretation of data. So if you could say, for example, every child in this country, in the US, needs to know the Constitution. They may disagree with whether the Constitution, what it means, whether the Constitution was crafted in out of a sort of agenda around slaveholding and so forth. These are interpretive questions that as kids get older, they can they should learn about. They should learn about different interpretations, a Marxist view, a, traditionalist view, all these things, but they still need to know what the Constitution says. So from a civic perspective, you have to have common reference points. So that's one thing. You can disagree about what it means. Then point number one. Point number two, a good curriculum should have viewpoint diversity built in. So most countries require comparative religion and ethics every year. For example, every kid, you might go to a Jewish day school, but you have to know what Hindus believe. So that's the other piece that I would say. And then lastly, there's a whole lot of work about in the classroom, what should be off limits. And certainly some topics should be off limits when there are settled issues. We shouldn't be having debates about, say, the merits of owning another human being, for example. We should not have meaningful debates about that. That is considered a closed issue, and it should be. I don't know. Anybody, Joe, Shinui, do you have any other comments on this?
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with your sort of response there, Ashley. And one thing I'd add, just sort of a little tangentially as well, kind of coming to the sort of knowledge versus process items behind that. We there's an earlier slide that we showed talked a little bit about Bloom's taxonomy as it relates to every teacher again who's kind of come through any sort of teacher induction process or teacher-based master's program has learned about Bloom's taxonomy and sort of the different level of processing, kind of building up to applying higher order thinking skills on things. What a lot of people might miss from time to time with things like Bloom's taxonomy is that knowledge and comprehension are sort of the foundation of being able to effectively exhibit higher order thinking skills on a topic. So whether that's evaluating something, synthesizing information, analyzing it, one's ability to effectively do those things is based on having kind of the content knowledge at hand to be able to build connections between items too. So I just stress that as well as it relates to sort of impactful instruction that kind of teaches those higher order thinking skills around things is often kind of rooted in having a foundation of shared content knowledge about topics too. So I just add that.
There's a great resource that just came out. It was an international open source book called The Knowledge Revival. And it actually gives concrete examples of the difference between having, that I think really answers the questions that were raised pretty effectively. But they're the right questions to ask.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but folks, feel free to drop more of your thoughts and questions into the chat and we'll pass them along. So Cindy admitted while she's not as familiar with open classroom climate as many folks might be, it reminded her of her university experience. Is that something that can be utilized at any grade level, or is it more appropriate for older students?
Well, so open classroom climate is kind of, it's not very familiar concept, I would say, but it basically means how your classroom is open, like the level of openness of the classroom climate. So how can it be utilized at any grade level? So I would say that it can be utilized at any grade level, but I would say, so teachers play a major role in creating this kind of environment. And in a lower level, grade level, students would need more guidance from teachers to have, have this classroom climate.
I would agree. I think littler kids can be taught how to have respectful disagreements or to take different perspectives. And as kids get older, they should certainly have, debate opportunities in the classroom. There's a lot of research around that. And we also know many teachers have trepidation leading classrooms like that. Best judgment based on the research is that very few, probably less than 10% of US classrooms routinely have multiple perspectives and important conversations. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But certainly it should also apply in universities. University professors owe it to their students to provide the best opposing views on important topics.
Thank you. Lynn asks, what are the key design principles and systematic approaches involved in creating an open classroom climate? Specifically, how do educators ensure that the design addresses various aspects such as inclusivity, collaboration, engagement, and adaptability to meet diverse student needs? I think you started going down that path, but maybe you got more to say.
These are
Well,
great questions. Go ahead, Shini.
yeah, I mean, I'm not really, I can't really say something concrete about what could educators do to address this kind of diverse needs from students, but I would say open classroom climate is matters because it doesn't only address social emotional aspect of students, but it also deals with knowledge and high level thinking in civic reasoning as well. So I would say there should be a balanced approach towards like while teachers encourage students social emotional learning, but at the same time um, with like endorsing students to go deep in high level thinking.
I would also say that most educators in our country don't have practice leading these kinds of conversations, nor have necessarily the subject matter background that you need to actually feel confident in leading these kinds of conversations. So one of the things our team advises a lot of districts or states is, make sure you're when you bring in a great curriculum that has viewpoint diversity baked in, or when you bring, say, the Bill of Rights Institute in, make sure you fund and support teachers' professional development on that curriculum. So they have practice, they have modeling, they have role playing that they can do. That's one thing, really, really important, is to give teachers that kind of capacity. The other thing is, in today's political climate, there can be real trepidation on the part of educators to talk about current events or controversial topics. And there, the administrators, the school principals, the school boards can play a real role in saying to parents, listen, we're going to discuss meaty and difficult issues, and your kids are going to sometimes confront things that you don't agree with, they don't agree with, and that's okay. That's part of our job as educators, and just being very clear about that.
Thank you. Ashley, while you were talking, I was thinking about our homeschool hub and wondering if any of you have thoughts about parents who homeschool, because I know that's a topic we also talk a lot about at School of Education.
Yeah. Well, we have seen a lot of the kids, well, just anecdotally, a lot of the kids who come through the National Civics Bee were homeschooled.
Yep.
And I think with parents, finding a really good curriculum and finding ways to get your kids involved in the community is really important. Whether the kids are homeschooling or in a regular school, you want both civic opportunities, and parents who are homeschooling certainly have more flexibility to spend time in community service, community activities, and so forth. But we are very curious. This year, Sheenie, Joe, and I will be trying to interview parents who are homeschoolers, who are homeschooling their kids on some of these questions.
Thanks. I'm going to come back to another question. This has actually been a question from a couple people, but Tom really appreciated, Ashley, your comments on adults learning more about civics, as did I, learning and the parents that you all saw at the Civics Bee. Tom asks, do you think there's a growing or waning push for civics education among adults? And are there any good resources for lifelong learners like me? Tom, I asked them this question a little earlier today.
Joe, do you want to reflect on that? I have some thoughts
that's
too.
a great question, Tom, and others who posed that as well. I think that I think with kind of the internet age, and particularly with so many kind of organic discussions that happen amongst people on social media with regard to civics topics, I think there's a growing push in a lot of ways to learn more about different topics of kind of civic importance and things like that than there's been before. I think there are a lot of great resources. I'm going to go back and plug the Bill Rights Institute and some of the resources that have been kind of highlighted through that is just really kind of great open source stuff for anybody to access that's really, really useful on that end too. So those are some of my initial thoughts on it. But Ashley, Sheeny, what do you think?
I think being a parent is a great way to learn
Yeah.
more. And we produced a resource called Civics at Home that is for parents to learn alongside of their kids. I think when you have kids of any age at home, there are things you can do to learn together. And our resource has quite a lot of those little suggestions in there. But I think the sad truth is that, you know, many adults in our country didn't have an opportunity to learn about it or want now to really learn more. And I would agree with Joe that there's a lot of open education resources where you can go to learn. Gilder Lehrman also has wonderful resources. National Constitution Center has done a great job of curating multiple perspectives. They have been very intentional on any subject to have scholars from the left and the right and the center writing about things. So those are some of the staples where I would go. Interestingly, and this is something that I learned recently, voting districts that are competitive, where they're not just all one party and predictive, though this is one thing that makes gerrymandering even sadder, because when you have competitive districts, adults and young people are statistically more involved and engaged and stay engaged. So one thing you can do if you want to advance civic learning in adulthood is to go to your legislature and say, let's stop gerrymandering by party.
Um, there's another question here. Every program that we focus on at Hopkins, the hottest topic in the dialogue these days is AI. CK wants to know, what are your future predictions for civics discourse with AI making it difficult to distinguish between real and fake in most social media-based information? And how will this impact social studies, civics course curriculum, dialogues across?
Just had a conversation about this last week in Washington, D.C. There was a dinner where a lot of civic leaders were coming together, and this was topic number one. And I think pretty much all of us agreed that AI could be a useful tool for people who already know a lot. We do not want it to be a substitute. And it doesn't matter how good the AI tool is, young people need to learn about the world so that, as Joe has mentioned, as our work on knowledge building shows, they've got a lot of information about the world and civics and government in their back pockets. They know how to judge what's true, what's not true. So if someone comes to you and says, you don't need to know anything, AIs, just look it up or Google it, do not buy. Do not buy what they're selling. It's a bad, I mean, remember in the 50s, everybody thought the big push was have a television set in every classroom. I kid you not. I've looked at all the teacher prep programs. They all had courses on how television was going to make their jobs redundant. People still need to know stuff.
To add a little bit about this, oh, Joe, do you have anything
Oh,
to
go
say?
ahead. I was just agreeing. Go ahead, Sheeny.
Okay. So I think in this era where like there's so much information and in the internet, and students do need to learn media literacy, and that should be structured in curriculum as well, because I was born and raised in Korea, and I think this is Korean situation or maybe global situation, but there's a growing animosity and hostility using social media information on political events or societal events. So, and students just like soak this kind of information without like knowing how to distinguish what's fake or real. also AIs. So ICCS actually has a questionnaire that kind of asks if you have like for students, if you have learned how to distinguish, like information from web-based sources, like do you know how to do reference check or like those kind of things. Also like how like do you trust those kind of social media information? Those kind of skills are already there, and I think we're also thinking about adopting those skills as well with the increasing needs of media literacy. And yeah.
I've been in multiple conversations in the last week where it comes back to being able to think critically and examine what you're being told. So that seems like I'm hearing that here too. We have very little time left, but there's a question. There's two questions that I'm going to conflate into one. Basically, two people are asking. Students are under a lot of pressure. Teachers are under a lot of pressure to focus on STEM or standardized testing or college entrance exams and all of those things. How do we make more time for or make space for improved civics education in schools?
Ding, ding, ding. Very good question. There's so much evidence that when kids have more time with social studies, they do better at reading and other things. And any skills-based question, any college entrance exam, any state assessment, kids who know more things do better on those skills-based assessments, like, state assess, all those things. So first of all, in elementary schools, it requires a bell schedule that makes time for civics and social studies. And some states are starting, the biggest game changer is when a state has a 4 stakes assessment on civics. Florida did this 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. More and more states are requiring civics tests, which means teachers will teach the content and then giving teachers the tools. So there are things you can do. It's bell schedules, it's assessments, it's state policy.
I feel like we could talk about this all night long, and but we have to stop. We promised it would be a short night.
And it's dinner time.
And it's dinner time for some of us, yeah. So thank you so much, Sheeny, Joe, and Ashley, for taking the
thank you.
time out of your busy schedules and for doing it on the eve of what I know is a very busy run at Civics B, to share your thoughts and research about this work at Hopkins and with this community. I also want to thank everyone who tuned in to listen to our conversation today. We hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I encourage you to attend more of the Hopkins at Home free public virtual content in the future. In fact, we have one coming up from School of Ed next Thursday, so I'll plug that. And to find out more about that, visit hopkinsathome.jhu.edu. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful night and a delicious dinner, Ashley.
Thank you.